everybody. Hi, everybody. We got a full house. Hey, we're going to start the appraisal fair. I want to kind of apologize for our audio yesterday. For those of you that were at home watching, novice me, we had the sale in June. We had our speaker system outside, but we were getting cell phone reception, and it was ruining the audio. So this time I brought my audio back behind me, and I guess this little auction house kind of made it like a tunnel for you guys at home. We'll fix that situation next time, and I know there's nothing else I can do except for apologize, but for those of you that stuck around and watched it, thank you. Who is our in-house production manager? Let's see, LaDonna. Can you tell us if we are talking at a correct volume and if our video is good this morning or this afternoon? Hi, Susie, and here is George.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, let us know how we sound, and we think we have this under control, but we can switch mics if we have to, I think. So if we need to, we will, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what everybody brought, and it's all a surprise to me. A few people said, would you like to see in advance? And I said, no, let's all be surprised together. So we will see what people have, but
okay.
It should be a lot of fun, and I'm so glad people have turned out.
Okay, so what we're going to do, look at, we have a full house. We have some local people in the house. We have some people from Facebook and YouTube. Which mic is this? It's the webcam. We just have the webcam mic on. Audio is good, great. Video is good. Okay. So we're going to switch positions and do a little test appraisal. And I'll go first, and I got a little story about it. I'll sit right here and tell the story before we go ahead and do it. So we're going to, well, no, I guess I will tell it while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. No, I can't.
Oh, you can't.
See, this is all techie stuff. It gets in my head, and I think I can do something, and I really can't. So I'm going to show you the picture, but I'm going to tell you the story first.
Perfect.
When I was first starting out in the business, I had a little gas station that I had as a shop when I was 18 years old. And it was a 1920s gas station, and I had been to a local sale here in Marshall, and I picked up a porcelain standard oil sign. And this was the first sign that I was in trouble, because John looked at me back then, and I had just started dating him, and he said, what the heck did you do? How are we going to get that home? And so if this works, bear with me. I've got another camera. I'm going to show it to you. And this has been hanging in the barn for 40 years. And I just brought it to appraise. So Barry and I are going to switch chairs, and I'm going to go to the other camera, and we're, yes, I will, you're not going to hear me over there probably unless I talk louder. Okay, so here we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and add this to the stage. And let's see here.
And now I'm in her spot, so I saw you saying it was a little hot, so I'll speak a little more softly. Can all you folks in the audience hear? Okay, great. I think we're going to be just fine then.
Okay, I got to get this back.
Let us know if you're still hearing us all right. But yes, I'm very curious to see, well, I do see the sign. It's huge, so she's going to try to get it on a picture for you so that you can see what we're looking at here. It's really cool. And that was the first thing you got when you were brand new in this?
No, the first thing I bought was not that, but close to the first thing.
One of the first things you got. Oh, that's great.
Let me bring this camera in here. I thought we were, but we messed up here. Okay, enter the studio.
Okay, I think, here we go.
Yep.
Should come up on the split screen in just a second here, and then we'll show you this sign because it's really cool. And then the rest of it we should be able to do right here where we are mostly, unless someone else has something really huge, in which case we'll do this again.
Let me turn this sideways and see what we can come up with.
And hi everybody out there. Hello everybody here, and hello everybody in the audience. I see Sean and Lorraine, and I see Linda and Robin Renee and a whole bunch of people. John Drumhiller, Jeffrey is here. Nice to see you, Laura M. Deb Spines, John Drumhiller. It should be fun. I think people brought some, I don't know what they brought, but they've been telling me they brought some interesting stuff. So there we go. There's the sign. Can you all see it? So that is a standard oil sign, and that would have hung over the garage bay in a filling station. And I'm guessing, now of course there were lots of Standard Oils because that was the company that got broken up in the antitrust way back when. So there was Standard of Indiana. That's maybe the most likely for around here because there were a lot of Standard of Indiana, but there was Standard of Ohio, and of course out west it's Chevron, so all that. So Standard's the big one. Those signs, it's funny because she said she found it in the barn. Did you say you paid $3?
I paid $3 for it.
$3, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something like 10 feet tall. And so, you know, there was a time people just were like, oh, rusty old sign. I grew up in a house that had a Coca-Cola sign that they had jammed full of rivets, turned upside down, cut the end off, and made it part of the ductwork in the house. Oh, that just killed me. So people didn't really give much thought to these at the time, but now, of course, we have American Pickers, and that has just changed the advertising market. It has turned it upside down. Everybody is into old enamel signs now. And a sign like this, this should date to right about 1950. And like I say, in that size, it would have been expected to be over the garage bay rather than out on the island. Because back then they usually didn't have covered islands, if you folks are old enough to remember, because it was full service and they wore a hat and you didn't need a cover. So that's where it would have been. And the value on this piece, I haven't seen this exact one sell lately, but even with a little bit of damage in the enamel, which is typical, sign that large, I'm seeing comparable sales somewhere in the $1,350 to $1,750 range these days. The price of advertising signs in the last few years alone has almost doubled because of the television show and so much interest coming in. And also we have a whole lot of people who are hitting retirement age, and if they have the money, they're buying their old favorite car and they're setting up their garage with old signs, and they have their classic Corvette or their 62 Studebaker or whatever in the middle of it, and it's surrounded with all sorts of this neat stuff. So that is an amazing story. But it was different back then when we started, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Because things like this were just a big albatross that nobody wanted to deal with. And so that's a clue for the future. If there's big collectible things that you think might be collectible in the future and you've got the space for them and the manpower to move them, we were talking last night about people buying telephone booths, and those can sell between $1,800 and $10,000 depending on the era. And we had a dealer here who was telling a story about how her son-in-law bought one and what a horrible experience it was for them to try to move it to South Carolina. Sarah, I think we'll have you come first because I know you've waited the longest. So come on up and have a seat and show us what you brought. And then we'll work through in order. I know we've got some dealers who have to get back to their spaces, and so we'll try to kind of keep the flow. If anyone's in a big hurry, please let us know. We'll make sure you get back. Tell us a little about what you have and how you got. Oh, wow.
I got that at an estate sale, and just recently. I didn't know what it was. It was a note with these buttons here, old, very old buttons, and yeah, I try to do like a little Facebook thing to try to figure it out, and I kind of pulled up some pins that were kind of similar, but they all seem to be like a painted back type thing.
Right.
And this one looks like either a photo or maybe a tintype.
This one is a photo, and it might be a tintype because it is old enough. This is going to be sometime between about 1865 and 1895, and it's a remembrance pin. It's a stick pin.
Okay.
It would have sat in the lapel or someplace. And this, it looks like an older gentleman, and his hairstyle, I suspect this is somebody who was probably lost in the Civil War or sometime shortly after. It was very popular in the Victorian time to wear remembrance jewelry. They would make it out of a dear departed person's hair, for example. They'd weave it into jewelry. Or they would, when they started having photography, you would start to see lockets and things with a sweetheart in the middle. So the pin is an interesting one. There's some value to these. Now, of course, if we found out this was somebody famous or even locally a pioneer, do you get it around here? You might, if you ever felt like it and had the time, you might go to like a local history museum and just see if by some chance his face matches somebody famous in the area. But the truth is, it's probably somebody who will never know. The value on that, I would say there's more interest in this than there used to be. I would say $35 to $50 is a possible selling price for something like that.
That's good.
Yes.
That's good. And then this item was also in with the buttons, and it says kind of on what it was, but I just didn't know what it was called.
Okay, well, let's get our loop here.
Okay.
And it is a little button, and it says, "Where I live, see inside." This is intriguing, and it opens. It's a little cuff link.
But it's like a screw.
It's a screw. Okay, I'm going to hold it up so the folks can see it. And so it's a little cuff link, and "Where I live, see inside." So let's unscrew it. There's a set. Good. That was the first question, is do you have both? This is also late Victorian, and it's an interesting thing, the cuff links that open. And then I'm not sure exactly what you would have put in this, because
The other one has the paper with the address.
it's got the paper with the address. Okay, very good. Yeah. So this was it was sort of, in a sense, sort of similar to like a calling card idea, that you meet someone and you've got, I don't know if I don't think you would have given this to somebody with your address, because that would have been a little too forward in that period of time. But I think that, I think it was actually in some ways a way to identify.
So maybe if somebody had dementia
If somebody, well, or if somebody, it could have been for if I lost or something is wrong, but it also could have just been something for fun, like, oh, I have a little thing in here and I do this and then I give you my note and then you contact me. Calling cards were a really elaborate thing in the Victorian time. It was quite a process. You did not just go to see people in polite society. You went to their house, you left your calling card, you left the house, and then the person who you called on would decide whether they wanted to see you, and depending on what corner of the calling card was folded, told you whether you were invited to the house or not. And they would send it back to the house with their messenger, and that was your message as to whether you were invited over or not. So there was a lot of ritual around this, and so I think it could just as much have been that, but I have to say I haven't seen one of these in person before, so now I have a little research to do to find out. And if I found out that there's more to this story, I will have to be in touch with you. So, so I think you watched the channel, so send me a message and say, hey, did you find out any more about that? Because I'm a little intrigued. Has anyone in the audience seen one like this before? Yeah, it's new to me too, but that's my impression from what I understand of the society at the time of what it would be about, and we'll do a little more research and see if I'm right about that theory. In any event, it's an interesting piece of Victorian jewelry. Again, Victorian jewelry is starting to be really popular, and even though a lot of people don't wear cufflinks, the fact that these are interesting and unusual, I would expect somewhere in maybe the $125 to $145 range potentially if you were going to sell them online. But let's see if we can find a little bit more about the specifics of it and get even better information for you.
Good return on my $2 investment.
That's so awesome. That's so great. And did you get any Victorian buttons in there too? It looks like they're kind of fun.
If you want to.
Well, let's look really quickly. I'll hold these up and show you. Buttons are very collectible, and people have collected for many, many years. I see a nice glass one with a swirl here. I see a porcelain one that's painted here. When you get back into really early buttons, some of them were painted with portraits. There were portraits painted of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln that were done as buttons. Those are extremely valuable. So if you see a big bin of buttons, and it looks like anything other than your usual plastics. Oh, here's a fun one. Yeah, this
that one's got a mark on the back, but I can't read it.
Oh, interesting. Well, let's see if we can see the mark. You can kind of see the construction of an earlier button here so that you'll know the difference from a later one. And then let's see if we can see anything on the back. That appears to be FEIN Fina. I think that's the company that made the backings, yes.
Cool.
Yeah, very fun. Thank you. I'm so glad you brought those, and thanks for being so patient. She's been shopping out at the flea market for a couple of hours waiting for us. So.
If anybody wants to see these close up in house, let her know. She'll show them to you if you didn't get to see them up here.
And I know we have a couple of dealers who have to get back to their booths, so let's go ahead and take a look at what they've got, and then we'll get to everyone else. I'm so glad that all of you showed up.
Okay.
I love buttons too, Beth Kemper. I see her in the comments there. Hi, Trudy Mendenhall. Nice to see you too. Blue Flamingo's here. The demo. Oh, and of course my phone rings in the middle, but that might be something I need to know. Let's see. Nope. I think that's Miss Wildlife calling, and I'm so sorry if you're watching. I can talk to you afterwards, but I'm going to have to keep the phone off.
Okay, so here's my little owl.
Hi there. How cool.
He's in some kind of container. I don't know.
Make sure you talk loud enough for that to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eileen's so soft spoken.
This was probably a mustard
I
container.
was thinking maybe that, but I wasn't sure.
That's kind of typical. They started doing a lot. Oh, and okay, we've got a little bit of a broken lid there, but it's a neat lid. So let's take it out so we can see. Mustard containers started to be sold commercially, and they were usually milk glass, and usually it seems like around the 1880s you start seeing commercial production of them. This one's neat because it has an eagle on it, and that style of eagle is typical of what I think it's the heraldic eagle. It's what we see typically in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, Civil War and early post-Civil War period. The piece of glass itself, most of the mustard jars we see probably around 1890s or so, and it's interesting because you know this is a commercial piece because notice how it doesn't glow like opal.
Okay.
And generally most of these pieces that are this age would glow like opal, and that means that they were the company that made this, which might have been Atterbury, but it could have also been like a diamond glass or just a regular commercial glass maker then. They were trying to save money by not using the chemical arsenic or other things that would give the opal fire. So this actually has a gray cast, which usually we see in late 20th century.
Okay.
So that's a little different, but we know this piece is old, and it's great that it's got the original zinc lid. I think the value on this, you know, it's a little bit of a minus that the lid isn't perfect.
Yeah,
but it's there, and that's the important thing, and I'm going to try to keep it there without.
Yeah,
You got it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we got it in there.
It was cool.
It's really cool, and it's owls, and of course the lid's great, and the owl is great. The wise old owl was a very popular thing to teach children about, and the main point of the wise old owl was he was wise because he sat there and listened, and they would teach children that in order to try to get them to shut up and listen. And so, and that was sort of the beginning of owls, and now everybody's all owl crazy. So you find things as old as this. I would say the value of this, if it was in perfect condition, I would say 85 to 100.
Really?
But in as-is condition, probably half of that.
Okay.
But still a pretty cool piece.
Yeah, I thought it was neat. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I was wise. All right.
That's right.
And Eileen is a vendor, and she's from New York.
Yes, thank you for
She's
coming
our
all this
auction
way.
manager.
Oh yeah, she did a great job. And for you folks who tried to watch the auction yesterday, I will have in my Monday video, I will have some of the auction in that so that you can see some of what went on, because it was really fun. And Heidi has a great patter, so I can't wait for you to see that. Hi there.
Hi.
And this is Mary, and I know you from
this is
Nancy.
Nancy.
I know you, Nancy. I'm so bad with names. I have an Aunt Nancy and an Aunt Mary, so
Okay.
you're in the line. But I know Nancy from the shows in Florida originally, and so we'll both be down there in November doing Mount Dora. I can't wait. And you brought a couple of things. Tell me about this and how you got it.
That is a travel clock that belongs to one of my girlfriends, and it was her uncle's who worked for Ford Motor Company back in the day and traveled all over the world. So she figured he must have taken it with him or bought it someplace.
I'm sure that he did, because it has a tag in here that says it was made in Wiesbaden, Germany. And a lot of these travel clocks in the 1950s and 60s are German made. And they were sold here in the United States, so he could have bought it here and taken it with him. But the fact that it's got the Wiesbaden mark means he might have bought it in Germany when he was on a trip. Travel clocks like this are starting to be collectible. The clock market has really changed. When I started in the clock market, this would have been considered too new to be interesting. And what people wanted is fancy old wooden clocks that sat on the mantle. Now the fancy old wooden clocks are actually kind of hard to sell, and younger people are really interested in travel clocks, electric advertising clocks, and even really like first generation quartz movement clocks, if you can believe that. So, you know, collecting changes with time and the market has changed. So this is actually something that's more collectible now. I'm not going to wind it because I assume it works and I don't want you to have to listen to ticking and alarms all day. But it's nice because it's got the phosphorescent handles, and it's also nice because it's got this black carrying case and black and gold. And the idea was that these could be given as gifts and monogrammed right here. And they're worth more if they are not monogrammed, because once it's monogrammed, unless you have that same initial, it's not your thing. This one's in nice shape. It's an attractive case. They typically sell for $25 to $30 now.
Okay.
And then this little piece, how did you get this?
It belonged to one of my neighbors, and she was downsizing, and I got part of her collection.
Very nice. It's really cute. It's a Jack in the Pulpit vase. And of course, Fenton made a lot of these, but this is an earlier piece, and it's hand blown, as you can see on the bottom. It's a nice color of green. Did you take a black light to it?
I did. I have it with me.
Oh, good, because I meant to bring one, and mine's so puny it won't show anything. So let's see. Thank you. All right, there's our glow. And it's got a nice glow to it. Now, my guess from the shade of green is that this is probably a Depression era piece, but there is because of the green in the base. However, there is a slim chance this could be as far back as late Victorian, maybe even 1890s. And the truth is that this optic is probably specific to a particular blower or maker, but there's no signature. It doesn't match anything in a line that we've seen. So the only thing I can really tell you about its origin is that it's likely to be American-made rather than European. They would have used a little trace of uranium to get that yellow-green color, and that was being done, again, that was something they really first started doing in the 1870s, but I think this piece is a little more, the base and everything is formed in a way that's more typical of 20th century. So I really think this is probably from about 1920s. And I cannot tell you who made it, honestly.
Okay.
I wish I could. The value, I think, doesn't matter so much of who made it, though. It's the fact that it fluoresces under a black light, because that's where the collecting market is really strong for these sorts of things now. And most people who are collecting Victorian glass, they want Vaseline green or something that fluoresces. So because of that, I think you're probably looking at about a $100 piece. And 20 years ago, when people were not so big into the black light, you know, we didn't really have, black lights were a thing that hippies put up in a psychedelic dungeon with posters back in the 60s, and that generation, the older generation, thought that was all very strange. Well, now those hippies are grown-ups and they're collecting, and they've discovered how cool black light is, and our technology has changed so that black light is a lot easier to get, and it's also a lot easier to shine on things, and that's why there's this sudden explosion of interest. We all knew 30 years ago this stuff glowed under a black light, but there wasn't a good way to show it, and now there is. So it's a very timely thing.
Okay, thank you, George.
Thank you, that was fun.
Thanks for coming to Taste That, too.
Yes.
All right, who wants to go next? Okay, Fran.
I am dying to meet this man.
Oh!
Well, thank you. Come on up.
You are the reason I am here.
I'm so glad. Well, nice to meet you, Fran.
Nice to meet you too. I brought this because I saw you and Jocelyn discussing it at the, where were you guys?
Mount Dora, because she found a piece of Joseph Hoffman for Mosier, yes.
Yes, she did. And I said, I have something that looks similar.
It does look similar, and the one thing about Mosier glass, and the first thing that I look for when I see something that seems similar, Mosier did something that was very distinctive, and they did it through their entire history as far as I know. So if it's a 19th century piece or 20th century, the thing they did that most other companies didn't do is when they would do the flat edge, they would bevel the inside and the outside just a little bit so that it wouldn't chip. And that was a really good thing for quality. It also makes it easy to tell Mosier. Now this one is really well formed and well polished around the top, but it's a flat polish. So what this company did is they fire polished the edge but they didn't bevel it. So I don't believe this is a Mosher piece, but I think you're on the right track as far as European crystal. It's definitely heavy. We're going to just ting. See how it rings like a bell? That means that there is probably at least 20 to 25% lead in this. So this is a nice piece of lead crystal. Probably is German. And probably from the same era, like they saw that was popular, so they did this kind of a modernist design. I don't know which company did this. Rosenthal had some pieces made by a company in Germany, but this one doesn't have any. Oh wait, maybe it does have a little mark. Let's just see.
Oh, good.
It's possible. Okay, sometimes the etches are so faint that you're not sure if you're looking at a mark on the glass or a signature, and in this case we're looking at a mark on the glass. So I don't think we can identify the maker, but a nice crystal vase this size. For a while, lead crystal has really been scary to people. They're afraid of the lead in it, and there's my generation kind of stopped using it because we got scared off about the idea, oh, if you put the booze in the decanter, it might leach lead into it. Of course, the booze might be as bad for you as the lead, but then the other question was, well, what if you just poured it out after you use it? And what I'm noticing is that younger people are starting to be interested in lead crystal again, and it doesn't bother them because they're like, well, we're just going to have a party, drink a glass of wine, and then rinse it out. We're not leaving it there for months and months to leach lead into it. Since this is a flower vase, it's not going to hurt anybody. Yeah. So we're starting to see interest in, as much as we all love colored glass, and we've seen a lot of really great colored glass sell this weekend here, the truth is that their generation, they've grown up around color, and they're looking for something that's maybe, every generation seems to want something a little different from the one before, and I'm seeing young people starting to do clear. So let that be a lesson, everybody. Clear glass might be something to start looking for again. I think it's a great piece. I would think, how did you get it?
I purchased it at a thrift shop that donates its proceeds to needy people overseas.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
One nice thing about thrifting, depending where you're thrifting, is you can also support a cause you like. And I would say that this piece is probably 1950s or 60s, and the value would be somewhere, $75 to $95 if you can find the right buyer.
Yeah. I saw it looked architectural.
It does.
Like
It's very similar to the way Joseph Hoffman stacked it. And if we knew who made it, we might even be able to discover whether he might have been the designer behind it. But I think what it was more, they saw Mosher being really successful selling this sort of thing, so let's sell something like it in design. And it's good. It's good design.
Okay, you want color? You
okay, we're going to get color.
I got color, guys.
I'm going to scoot this back just a bit so that I don't shake the camera every time. There we go. Oh, here we go. That's colorful.
Can you see the color?
Yes.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yes, I think we can. I'll tell you what, if you don't mind to move that one aside,
I would be happy to.
There's an idea for your color there. And how did you get this piece?
It was another sale, and it was at a church. And I paid $8 for it.
That's great.
And the proceeds were to go to help people who are helping people who are sex trafficking.
Oh, to stop that.
So these people go out and they've actually rescued some young people.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, this is a really pretty piece. And there's some things about it that we should show you. And the first one is that it has a Murano sticker on it. And the Murano sticker is red, and it's a circle with the gold in it. Now, that is a sticker that honestly should be a little scary. When you see these, the first thing you want to do is say, is this really Murano? Because this is the sticker that they're starting. There was a 60 Minutes investigation recently, and they went to Venice, and they showed glass sellers in like stores that sold glass in Venice to tourists, sticking these on all sorts of things that were not made on the island of Murano. And so you have to be really careful when you see this mark. The other thing, it's a more recent piece, and so you can see it's got this very polished out pontil, which is something we don't usually see on most glass other than some Scandinavian pieces until recently. However, I think I have good news for you. I am inclined to think that this actually is a Murano piece, and I'll tell you the reasons why. I know, it's an up and down like this.
Okay, I'm ready.
Here's why I think it is Murano. First of all, a lot of the knockoffs are really, they usually don't want to use the gold because it costs more money. Secondly, the reason that they're putting these little stickers on everything is to sell to people who don't really know on the basis that this is Murano. Yeah, it's Murano. Why would you put this sticker on the bottom if you're trying to con somebody into something? You're going to put it right in the middle of the piece where they can see it. And so the fact that this is put on the bottom makes me have more hope that it actually is a real Murano piece, because this is actually the Murano label that they're using now. So it's made it really, really confusing. But my thought is that this is a fairly contemporary piece. The quality does seem like it's Murano. And on that basis, presuming that all of that is correct, I would think your value might be 200, 225, because it's a nice, large, showy, pretty piece, even though it's newer in age. Now, there is a chance that it's a really good fake. I'm not going to lie to you because we're having so much trouble. But this one seems like the quality indications are more consistent with what I would expect from there. So my feeling about it is that I would probably, to be completely fair and wide open to anybody, if you're selling it, I would say, I would describe it as a contemporary art glass vase, gold, with gold in the glass, and talk about it's a spatter glass vase. And I would say, I would refer to it as, and it has a Murano label on the bottom. You're not saying anything that isn't true that way, and that's also a clue to the person looking at it that they maybe should do a little more due diligence and just make sure.
That's what I was going to do.
Good.
Thank you.
That's great. Oh, it's so nice to meet you. Oh, well, thanks. Oh, good. I look forward to it. I'm so glad you brought these.
Yeah, well, thank you. We all had a lesson, didn't we?
Okay.
It was
Who
my
else wants to
pleasure.
come up?
My pleasure, too.
Okay, come on up. This is Lynn, and she has a YouTube channel, Halen Vintage.
Halen Vintage, yeah, and you're going to meet her a little bit in my video tomorrow night, and you are really close to 1,000 subscribers.
I am.
Yes, I'm so excited for you. Well, that's fun. And tell me how you got this piece.
Like thrift store, shelter house, they do for battered women. So usually when I pick up milk glass, it's different pieces. So I had questions about this piece.
Yes.
Because it is imperial glass.
Yes, there's the IG label.
It's a colonial hat.
Yes, I think this is the colonial hat. I believe so.
Beyond that, I can't find any other information out about it.
Well, Imperial made a whole lot of this sort of stuff in the late 60s and early 70s. Imperial glass made all the collectors really angry in the late 60s. And we've got an example out there at the flea market because they were one of the last ones standing. So they bought molds from other glass companies when they closed. And this is typical. Fenton had molds from other companies. Now some of the Fenton molds have gone to other companies. It's common in glass where you see the same piece made by different makers in different colors over different periods of time. But Imperial started redoing other people's molds in their colors, and especially carnival glass, and there's a covered bunny dish out there. But they didn't take off the patented in 1899. They just used the mold, and that made the collectors really mad at them. Well, then Imperial went out of business. Now all their stuff's collectible too, and the collectors don't care because it's all really well marked from that era. It has this I with the G for Imperial glass, so you're not going to get fooled. This piece is probably from the late 60s with that mark. And also, like I was telling the gal with the mustard jar, notice it doesn't have an opal fire. And with art glass, you would expect pieces made before 1960 to have more of an opal fire. So we know this is a 60s piece. I'm starting to see, again, younger people. Milk glass is something we didn't have a lot of call for until the last few years. And with all these gray interiors and farmhouse, now all of a sudden white is a good accent color. And I'm seeing a lot of young people. I went to a flea market in Kentucky, and a 20-year-old woman came up and said, "Oh, I'm just so glad to meet you. I'm a viewer of yours, and I'm here to collect milk glass." And we were standing in front of a table, and I'm like, "That's a good piece, that's a good piece." And she scarfed up a whole bunch of stuff. So there is starting to be a customer. I don't know that the values are super high on it yet. It may be something that's worth kind of putting back for a few years, but my guess is that $30, probably somewhere in there, but it might be more with a little time. Hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a unique piece. I've never seen anything like it.
It's just
and
interesting,
I can't find any other information on it. That's why I thought I'd bring
And
it
this
up.
is why Cologne.
Just
Do that so everyone can see. Yes.
Yes.
I always have to put on a hat, right?
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, who's up next? Who is up next? Pauline.
Oh, Paul. Okay. Promise we won't forget you.
Are you going someplace, Doug? No. Okay, all right.
Well, this is someone that I have been excited to meet because Pauline is someone that I have known through Heidi, and I'm so excited to get to meet you in person.
Same here.
And what do you bring? You're wearing it.
Oh, yeah, that's so I don't lose it. That's a watch my dad bought, I don't know if at a sale or an antique store many years ago. And he bought it as a gift for my mom. Those are not her initials on it.
Right, and that's the thing with monograms, you just leave them. This is a really beautiful case, and this would have been considered in watchmaking, because it goes back so far. They still to this day call them gentlemen's and ladies, and this would have been a lady's watch because it's very fancy, it's a smaller size. And the idea was that, and this is nice, it's even got the original slide chain. You can see the slide here, and that goes back and forth to adjust it. And so it could be worn around the neck as a locket. It could also be put in a lapel and worn as a chain. And then you take like the men would do, the women would do as well. And then you take it out, and it was a chance to flash this thing, sort of like flashing a big wedding ring, like, "Oh, let's see, how are you doing today?" You know, that kind of thing. So here we go. I'm going to see if we can open this one easily. This one just seems to, okay, that's, interestingly enough, the jeweled part that you see that's fancy is actually on the back of the piece, and then the front of the piece is the monogram side. This will open, and then this will open, and this shows us our movement. Those little red dots in there are rubies, and they are actual industrial grade rubies. And they had something to do, which I should be able to explain, but it's too long to really go into. But it basically helped the watch run more smoothly, and that's why you see those are the jewels that they mention when they say it has a certain number of jewels in a watch. This one, the patent number is right around 1900, and I'm going to open the front because we should see what that looks like. This is nice because it's what they call a hunter's case. And a hunter's case always has a cover over the dial of the watch as well, because you wanted to keep it from getting damaged if you were doing something rough. Now, in the case of ladies' watches, it was just because it was stylish. They weren't really expecting they were going hunting. This is an Elgin. Elgin was the biggest watchmaker in the United States in its day. I believe that you have a rose-cut diamond and 2 rubies flanking the floral, and that makes me think that this piece is likely to be gold, and that makes a big difference in watch values. Let's take a look with our loupe here and see what we can find out. Oh, I did leave it out. I was going to say I should have left it out. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, the good news, and this seems strange, the good news is there is no mark on it. With gold, before 1915 in the United States, gold did not have to be marked. On the other hand, now we look on the other side, and it says warranted 14K US assay. Now, usually warranted means that there's a warranty on how long the gold plating is going to last. But in this case, because it says US assay, I think what they're actually saying is that it is guaranteed to be 14K in this case. So I think you have a gold watch. It would have been unusual to put jewels in a non-gold watch anyway. And because of that, I think you're probably looking, I doubt that the chain is, well, could the chain be gold too? That would add to the value. And the way we're going to look at that is we'll look at the back of the fob, and it also has mine-cut diamonds and a little ruby. So I believe this is the original chain, and I believe the whole thing is gold. And because of that, you're probably looking at well over $1,000 for that watch.
I am really surprised.
And it is a surprise because honestly, pocket watches, as wonderful as they are, just like I was saying about clocks, the new generation is more interested in wrist watches, and we see a whole lot of pocket watches that have lost a lot of value over the past few years. But anything that's gold or real material, that's shot up. So you got the right one, or he did anyway.
Thank you. And I'm from my whole married life. I lived in Elgin.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, I was there when they knocked down the factory.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, they finally took it out. Yeah, that was, yeah, there's also, if you are a boudoir collector, you ever see Elgin American compacts and things? Yeah, Elgin American, everybody thinks it was part of the watch company, and that was deliberate. They actually opened a factory to make jewelry and compacts and things down the street, and they stole Elgin's name, and Elgin sued them, so they called themselves Elgin American so they could get away with it.
Thank you so much.
And that factory is also gone.
Yeah, when they took down the Elgin watch factory, they had to block the land. Nobody could go in there because of all, you know, the paints that they used to glow.
Yes, the radium.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah, you would hear about the women who did the radium painting and they licked the brush to do the thing and they all got cancer. It was a terrible thing, and that's a real thing. They just didn't understand some of the chemicals and things, and industrial disease was a really big problem then. So, you know, for all the complaining we do about regulations, some of the regulations are to keep us safe, and I get that.
They even had their own stop on the Amtrak, you know, if we came from my mom's to Elgin. Before you got to the Elgin stop, it was
the factory stop.
National Street for the National.
For the Elgin National, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, that was fun.
Okay, we thought we're gonna do Doug next.
Yes.
Oh, Miss Kay's coming. Miss Kay's coming.
Yes, hello.
Miss Kay.
Hello, George.
Hi there. Oh, isn't this nice? Okay, so it looks like we have a jewelry set, and I know you love the jewelry like I do. We actually sold jewelry to each other. I bought from her, she bought from me. And tell me a little about this set and how you got it.
It's estate sale.
Estate sale, okay. And do you typically carry Mexican jewelry?
I like Mexican jewelry.
Yes, I do too. And the market is starting to really like Mexican jewelry and understand it as well. These are the earrings. Now, one thing with Mexican jewelry of this era, because this looks like it's probably a 1950s or 60s vintage, is that they use screwbacks on these. So this is original. Now, it's pretty well known in the antique community that a lot of people can wear clips just fine. A lot of people wear pierced, but not too many people like screwbacks because they really hurt when you put them on. So a lot of times we'll see these converted, but this is how they're supposed to look originally.
I grew up with screwbacks, so.
So you're used to it, yeah, and you can
But I don't
pat
wear
them
them
and
now,
stuff.
but I-
Right, that's a point too, right?
I'm curious about the stones.
The stones are a green agate, and you have a mark on the back of these that says FRA, and that is one of the, an HO in Mexico. This is a silversmith, I believe, from Mexico City, which is, they were mainly up around Oaxaca where the silver mines are, and in that area, but I believe that this is actually a company in Mexico City that brought the silver and made them. But yes, these stones are all various green agates. And in this case, they've gone to great lengths to make sure that they are really, really uniform in color so that they look almost like jade. And I think that was the intent. Sometimes they use stones that are a little less perfectly, solidly green than this. It just depended on what kind of an effect they were trying to get. How did you get this, and do you mind me asking how much?
I buy box lots.
Oh, very good. So it was just sort of part of a buy, and there it was. One thing that's nice about these, we see these a lot where they're carved, and the carvings usually are sort of, they're rough looking and they look like, oh, I don't know, masks from maybe the Mayan culture or something. And those are not as popular as the ones that are just plain like this. So this is actually more saleable. And for the 3-piece set right now with the interest in sterling, I mean, it won't have the value of a William Spratling or one of the Margot de Taxco, which are the two really, really high-end Mexican jewelry makers. But I still would expect $145 maybe for that set, top end, and a nice set. Like if I took it to West Palm Beach, I would expect that set to be priced there or maybe north of there a little.
Oh my.
So I think you got a great thing in the box lot.
Well, didn't I though?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you, George.
You're very welcome.
I was really mostly interested in this. I just didn't have any idea what a stone was.
Yeah, it
I
looks
didn't
so
think it
close
was
to
jade,
jade, but
but,
it's a little bluer,
yeah.
exactly. But no, it's a particular agate they have there. You'll see them in that color and then tiger eye and other various things, but they're almost always some form of agate.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Likewise.
Okay, Doug.
Hello.
Hi. Gonna change everything up a little bit.
Good. Hey, that's great. You never know what'll come. This is what's fun. Ah. Okay, well, let's start with this. How'd you get this guy?
Actually, either Brent or Heidi sold it to me. It was on a trailer, and take a pick of what you want, and I took it off the trailer.
Oh, that's great. Well, there is a name on it, and if you notice, it's a little hard to see under the hands, but it says Sarsaparilla or Sarsaparilla Quartz. Sarsaparilla was a company in the 1980s that made their living by doing, they didn't do fakes, they didn't do reproductions, but you'll pick up everything from pink flamingo figures to clocks like this, and they did, I have one for sale in one of my stores. They did things that looked like Art Deco or 50s, but they did it in the 1980s when there started to be a lot of nostalgia for that era. So 30 years ago, these were new things, and I remember going through my antique mall, I had to jury things and take out things that were too new to sell, and I would, anything that said sarsaparilla, I would give back to the dealer and say, I'm sorry, this is too new, it's to look old, but it's not old. Well, now it's 2023, and I am buying this stuff and selling it at vintage shows because it is now vintage. The designs were unique to them, and there is a collector market for it. I actually have one of their, it looks like a 1930s plane, but it was done in the 80s, and it's a nightlight, and the front is a big blue glass fuselage, and then it's on chrome. And I actually bought that from a viewer who said, you know, I see these sell for $200 online now. Would you like to buy it from me? And I said, you know what, I would. And so now we're looking for this sort of thing. I suspect when they sold it to you, it wasn't worth a whole ton of money. But
No, it wasn't.
What'd you get for it, Doug?
I don't, it's either $1 or 10.
If it was Doug, it wasn't much.
So it was $1 or $10. Well, now I would think that probably $50, $60, maybe as much as $100 if the right person saw it. If you went online, you'd probably find an exact comp for that one.
Well,
So goodbye.
all right. Then that.
Okay. And, oh, interesting. Cincinnati, 1898. Do you know anything about this or how you got it? Or
It was my grandma's.
It's your grandmother's. Okay, very good. Now, can you tell me anything? I have to be honest here. I see CA something, and I get the feeling that this is some sort of an organization that was having some sort of an event and gave these out as a souvenir at the time. And I can't quite tell from the monogram what that would be.
I thought they said they got it at a World's Fair or something.
Well, I would say that too because of the mark, and I do think it was some sort of an event, but Cincinnati has never hosted a World's Fair. So I think it was some other event happening there at the time. It's probably silver plate. I'm going to see if we find any mark. Sometimes these are marked and sometimes not. And I don't see anything on the back, but it was likely made in the U.S. It's just a very sweet little drinking cup. It's almost like a child's cup, really. We see a lot of these in families where it was the thing they gave to the baby and then they kept it. but this one came to your mom. We have some viewers out in Cincinnati. I don't know if any of us are, any of you are with us in the chat right now, but if you happen to have any scholarship on fraternal organizations or events that happened in that year, that would be probably where we would look. Value on these is usually fairly modest, $25 or so, but it's more the connection to family. And I really would like to know what this, but I just, Cincinnati A something, and it's some group that I just, you know, at first I thought, oh, maybe that's a G and it's a GA. Oh, wait a second. No, I think we got it, folks. Sometimes it takes a minute in an appraisal to absorb and come up. I just figured out what this is. This is a big G. This is an A. This is an R. This is from a Grand Army of the Republic encampment in Cincinnati in 1898. I just got it. I was seeing that as a C for Cincinnati, and I looked again, and it's a G. The Grand Army of the Republic and the, I think it was CVA, Confederate Veterans Association, about 20 years after the Civil War ended, there was this strange sort of nostalgia. Everybody was older, and they had this thought of, oh, the camaraderie, and we got through all that together. And they started having encampments where they would go and they would have basically a reunion. They would camp out. It wasn't quite like now. They weren't reenacting the Civil War. I don't think they wanted to relive it. But they would get together and talk old times. And this went on up until, I think, the late 30s, and finally the last of the Civil War veterans was pretty much gone. So now that I get this, it's a little more valuable than I told you, probably $45 or $50, because there are people who are Civil War buffs who collect GAR and Confederate veteran stuff for that. So now we know what it is.
Yeah, it just always was in my grandma's china cupboard, then my mom got it, then now it's mine.
That's
so.
great. Well, I have a feeling probably it was your, I'm guessing a great-great-grandfather or something probably went to that event.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, that's
All right.
great. Well,
Thanks,
at least
Coach.
mystery solved. Sometimes it takes a minute.
All right, thank you.
Okay, who's next?
I've been telling people that one thing I like about doing appraisal fairs is that I learn a little bit each time too, and oftentimes it is like that where we see something, we have to absorb it a little, and then the answer comes to us as we're looking at it. So stay tuned. Hi there. Oh, isn't that pretty? I just love this stuff. How did you get this piece?
I bought that at a thrift store in Southwest Michigan.
Oh, it's beautiful and it's really heavy. And do you remember what you paid for it?
$12.
$12. Okay, well, this is a really substantial chunk of glass. Most of this, there were a couple of companies that made, first of all, when you see cranberry glass, it took gold to put in the glass, and it costs money, and so they didn't really tend to do it until it was popular in the Victorian era, and then you don't really see a lot of cranberry again until the late 60s. And it started to be made by Chalet Glass up in Canada, but this isn't their foot. There was a company called Rossi in Canada, but theirs are typically signed. So what this leaves us with is this is probably Bohemian from Czechoslovakia at the time, now the Czech Republic. And this could have been made anytime from about 1970 to about 1990 or 95 in this form. I think we're just starting to see people really appreciating this era of cranberry glass again, because the color was so popular, and then it sort of became associated with, oh, that's a grandma, grandpa color, and younger generations didn't pick up on it because it didn't look good with orange, although I actually like it with orange. And now there's people starting to pick it up again. So today I'm going to tell you the value is probably around $65. In a few years, the value might be $100 or more. If color trends repeat like they typically do, I think we're going to see cranberry starting to become more and more popular again.
Hey, thank you.
Neat piece.
It's heavy.
It's really heavy. That's probably 10 or 15 pounds of glass easily.
Okay, come on up. These are my neighbors.
Oh, that's great. Oh, yes, that's right. They told me they had some things, and I'm looking for, they mentioned one of these yesterday, so I kind of have an idea. Because these folks came out to shop at the flea market that we're having, and then said, oh, you're doing appraisals, we've got some stuff. Well, this is interesting. And it has documents in it. Documents are always good to bring to appraisal fairs. Sometimes they're accurate and sometimes they're not, but at least it gives us an idea of what people thought of it when they got it. And this one says it is a Brazilian merengue, or morenga, I should say. I think I'm getting that right. Used as a water pitcher on the table, being porous, it keeps the water cool by evaporation, and that's exactly right. And then this one says, we use this in Brazil, and the signature is E. Davenport, 1891. And it has that on the bottom, so let's take a look at it. Very interesting. Yes, I see. Okay, and this was it's so funny. You'll see these old red labels. Whenever I see a red label, I know that the piece has been around at least since the Second World War or earlier, because that was the peel and stick label of the time. This is really neat, and it's I'm glad that they had the information with it, because I would have recognized what it was, but I don't think I would have thought it was as old as it is, because the style is actually really very similar to what we see in some contemporary stuff. It does have the made in Brazil on the bottom, and so I think that it would have been, I think the story actually is true. I'm thinking the date is probably close, because these ochre colors and browns were very popular in the arts and crafts era, but I'm thinking it might be a little later than the date that they said. It might be, 20 years later potentially. But it's really interesting, because just like for our glass collectors here, we talk about glass frit and overlays and things. Well, this has an overlay that is essentially a glass overlay. So all of this is little pieces of glass frit that have been applied and cooked in, and that's kind of an unusual thing, because that's hard, a ceramic company then having to decorate with another material. I think it's a really neat piece. How'd you get it?
Auction.
Auction? Do you mind me asking what you paid?
35.
35. Okay. I think
thought I was nuts.
I think they're actually pretty great, and the reason I like them, they're similar to what we have as we call a tumble up that we put by a bedstand, but this is a larger thing you put on the table. And the idea was you have your liquid in, usually water. It keeps it cool all day because it can breathe, but this covers it up so the bugs don't get in it. And then when you want a glass, you just take this off and pour yourself, and there you go. Or it could have been for more fun beverages as well. I think the value on this, if I had this in a store, I can't say I've dealt with a lot of these, so it probably needs a little more research for value, but off the top of my head, based on similar things I've seen, I would think maybe you could add a 1 in front of what you paid for it. So I think you got an interesting piece, and it's a good deal. I would, if it was a glass piece, I would say even more, because it would be from this country and there'd be more interest here. But I think it's really neat. And I would set that back in. Yeah, it's really cool. If I saw that at an auction, I think I would buy it for $35 and not even question it.
And then these little guys we bought at an auction from you.
Oh, you got it from me?
Yep. And was our first auction we went to that had stuff like this, so
they're
we don't know
really
anything
beautiful.
about them.
Well, I think you know a little something about them.
Probably not, George.
These are really lovely mantle lusters, and they are Bohemian glass, and they are cased. And so what that means is that it's hard to show you folks, but I'll do the best I can. I can't really tip it over because we don't want to jangle these around and chip them. But these are called mantle lusters. The lusters are these big, long, dagger-like crystals that are hanging from it. It's one layer of glass, white layer over a green layer, and then they paint everything out. They cut back to the color underneath, and that gives it the design. And I'm going to lift it up so I can see the bottom. Oh, yeah. Okay, these are old. They did a lot of these in the 1950s and 60s because that generation remembered them, and so it became a thing again. But the reason we know these are old, and I'm going to be as gentle as I possibly can, but I want to try to show everyone. So I'm going to hold these like this. Here we go. Look at the way the bottom is made. It has a metal screw in the bottom, and that tells us that this is an older piece because of the way that it's formed. And so I'm going to gently put this down and try not to rattle your lusters.
Rattle your luster. I love that.
Yeah, don't rattle my lusters. That might be the next. That might be the next shirt. Anyway, the color is great. They have age, which is really nice, and there's starting to be interest in these again. Victorian was really popular 30 years ago. People were restoring houses, then they filled them with old Victorian stuff, and then that was kind of the market. They're starting to get noticed again, partly because a lot of people grew up with the 50s and 60s versions, so they recognize these a little more than some of the older glass. And I'd say, I probably should ask you what she charged you before I say this.
I don't remember.
Well, everybody told us there was something, but nobody bid on but us. We paid $65.
65. Oh, that's a great price. Yes. The last pair I sold that were like this, that were this era, I think I got $250 for the set. They could be anywhere from there to about $3 1/4, especially if they're larger. Certain colors are even more desirable. If they were 1950s and 60s, they still have pretty good value, but they would be probably a third less than that. So it's nice that you have the really old ones.
Great. Thank you.
They're cool. And I see you've got one other thing here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, don't be. That's fine. I'm glad that people brought stuff. And
this come from my dad. He sent it up to me from Laredo, Texas.
Wow. And did he tell you how he got it?
He paid $5 for it at the estate sale.
That's fantastic. Well, this is a nice old bugle, and you do see these. Oh, Stephanie's asking real quickly, should those have chimneys? No, they don't have chimneys on those. They're not meant to be lamps. They're just meant to be like a nice fancy bowl. Maybe you would put something in them, but really they were just meant to sit on the mantelpiece and look nice. Anyway, getting back to the bugle here, there's some nice features of this. First of all, it's got some reinforcements, and you can tell by all the denting, this was indeed meant to be taken out. It was probably used in war theater, although it does not have a U.S. mark to say that it's Army issue, but it does look like the sort of thing they would have used to play reveille or taps in like Spanish-American War, World War I, somewhere in there. Do you play?
No.
I'm not very good either. I had one of these come to an appraisal fair, and the guy was fantastic, and he actually played reveille for us, and I couldn't show you all because YouTube would demonetize it. But now that I said it didn't have a mark, I'm seeing there's a whole bunch of marks on the top, and we're going to look a little closer because I'm sure this is military issue, and I think it's going to tell us what it is. Let's see. Church lads and yes, Church Lads Brigade, and the Gravens Company seems to have made, and then there's an embellishment in the middle. Fight the good fight, it says. So it's interesting because it doesn't say specifically U.S. Army, but it's absolutely referring to being used in a war theater. So I do believe this is military issue, and that helps with the value. You know, the fact that that's dented and all of that, that's kind of to be expected if it was used in that sort of a thing. I've never seen one of these that was perfect and not bashed up unless it was a reproduction. That's as good as you're going to get. Value on these is pretty good. He paid $5. $100 to $100 1/4 is kind of typical. You might think higher because it's a musical instrument, but they are very basic, and they did make a lot of them at the time because of all the wars. So it's really cool. That was a lot of fun. I'm so glad you brought it.
Thanks for watching.
Okay. What do we got next?
I'm not interested in two separate.
Okay.
One ahead.
Oh, these are great. I love these. How did you get this collection?
We attended one of our favorite auctioneers, other than myself and Heidi. And that's Brent and Kevin Belcher out of Marshall, and they had an auction, a state auction, and they had it in Coldwater, Michigan. There were tremendous numbers of the core pottery pieces. The person that they had the auction for had passed away, or the estate. They smoked heavily. You couldn't tell the color of anything.
Wow.
So it had to all be cleaned up. But we liked, it's such a soft finish and soft colors.
It's so nice to feel too. It really is satiny. I mean, when you feel it, it's smooth as silk, and it's something Coors did that not a lot of other pottery companies got that exact feel in their matte glazes. Now, how did you clean these if it was in a place with a lot of nicotine and tobacco smoke? Do you remember, Jenny?
I just used dish soap and water.
Dish soap and water, and just went carefully over it, and that is the thing to do. Dawn actually works really well. It's great that you took a chance on these. Sometimes with these matte finishes, the stuff will be in the glaze so deep that you can't get it out and they're ruined. So when you're buying these things, do like they did. Don't pay a lot until you know for sure if you can get them clean. But this is a great little collection. Coors Pottery was in Colorado, and it was actually formed in the Depression. And yes, it does have to do with Coors beer. The people behind that were very concerned about between Prohibition and the Depression that nobody was going to be able to make any money, and they started making pottery. And I think it went on for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. These are really fun pieces. They tend to have an Art Deco look and be very balanced because that was their time. The piece that's actually the most unusual in some ways is this one because it's got the embossed floral design. A lot of their designs were very plain like this, so this is actually unusual to have this. So it's probably the most valuable of the collection. I would say that your bud vases and the small pieces here, which are ones we see more typically, are probably in the $35 to $40 range each. The larger one here, it's lovely because they like to color scheme, so they all really go together well in a display. And I like the two-toning. That's very 1930s. This one's probably about $50 unless you're in Colorado, in which case it'll be $85. And this particular piece, I think, might go for $100 or more if you got it to the right collector, because I think it's the scarcest of the bunch. Wonderful
Thank you very
set.
much.
That's
It's always
great.
good to see you.
Oh, it's always good to see you too. And this is a wonderful collection. I'm glad you brought it.
Thank you.
And isn't it fun? This is one of the things about collecting. If you saw one of these pieces by itself, you go, oh yeah, it's a blue vase. You see a bunch together and you're like, wow, look at all the shapes and sizes, and you can make a display and it tells the story, and I just think it's cool. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to come next? Mr. Curtis?
Mr. Curtis. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, first let me say thank you to both of you and your other co-sponsors for
Oh,
providing
gosh.
this event. What a great opportunity, and what you talk about scholarship. This is where can you learn like you do today, and it's just been great. What a great event you've had.
Thank you. And it's so fun to do this when there's a bunch of people who are like-minded, and especially in this context. I love doing the real-world shows anyway, because all of the fun and connectedness we find on social media, we also get that in real life together. But it's especially fun when it's like this, where you can stay late. There's not a rush like, oh, we're locking the building, everybody go, and then you wait, and then you see each other next year at the show. We actually have gotten to really talk and interact and just have a really fun time together. So
Great
I'm
job.
so glad you came.
We're patient. Yeah, we do. Dawn and I are from the Twin Cities, and so we attend a lot of estate sales there. And we went to an estate sale, and we left, and Dawn said, did you see that bracelet in a jewelry case? And I said, yes, I think I did, I think I did. And I said, you know what, I forgot one of my pieces. I went back. So I went back and bought it for her. And but it's kind of neat, and we're not really sure about it, but I paid around $100 for it, I think, in that area.
Okay. Well, it is a really neat piece, and I'm going to show you up close so that you folks at home can see the detail, and then you folks in the audience, you might have to go and look at it up close with them. It's done in a way where it appears to be two dragons that are chased.
This was a slip that was in the case with it, and they had gone to the bank to get some money for it, and it was kind of interesting because I thought it might help with the value a little bit. We weren't sure if it was
bracelet 102082, and that is absolutely correct. This is definitely a 1980s style. It's got a safety catch. the design, when you start seeing these interesting designs. Before the 70s, there really wasn't a great call for things that had unusual designs. People wouldn't have worn this as jewelry because it didn't look, quote unquote, like other people's jewelry. It was sort of, oh, it's foreign looking and it's gargoyle-ish and it's this and that. Well, in the 70s and 80s, the sensibilities really changed. And all of a sudden, things like this jewelry that was shaped like, people started wearing pins that looked like giant spiders and leopards down their shoulder. And people really suddenly wanted things that were exotic and unusual. So I do believe that this 1982 is probably about the time. It says Boxstrock's 80% silver, and I think that's probably right. I'm going to take a look at this mark. You see lots of sterling jewelry, but sterling is pretty soft, and so sometimes for bracelets you'll see them, yeah, and this one's just marked silver. So this is what they call coin silver, so it's about 80% pure rather than 92.5. So there's some value for the silver in it, but really it's all about the design, and the design is really neat. And I would say that you said that you paid, I'm trying to see what they paid originally, not a whole lot it looks like, maybe $20, $30, and you paid $100. And I would say those are also, they're semi-precious stones that are in their mouths. It's not, you know, those aren't rubies and emeralds, but they are probably a garnet and a nice little agate of some sort. I would think at a higher end show where you're selling good jewelry, like I sell in West Palm Beach, for example, I would expect a jeweler there to probably put about double what you paid for it on it. So I think you got a good deal for what it is, and it's just really good quality, and you can tell. And I think that that matters. I mean, if you're looking at something out in the field and you're not sure what it is, you know, quality is a really, does it feel, this feels substantial. Things are soldered together well. There's not any flashing, you know, you could find something that sort of was a knockoff look-alike of this, and you're going to see it's a little rough around the edges, or they put a texture on the back that's kind of rough on your wrist because they didn't want you to see the flaws, things like that. So, you know, quality is quality no matter when it's made, and if you really look something over and judge it on that, you're going to probably be happy with what you bought.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, that was good.
All right. Anybody else? Come on up if you're waiting.
Oh, Cheryl Ross, hi there in the chat, and she said, yes, there is a movie called The Radium Girls about the health problems with the watch painters and stuff. It's very interesting. It's sad, but it's interesting, and it'll definitely tell you why we have OSHA.
Okay, so this we got at an estate sale.
Oh, cute.
And, you know, I was looking online because for resale and stuff, what you can't find, it's like, I can't find it. You know, some of it said it was like from Tibet, and then some said like maybe from the turn of the century, or I just wasn't sure. I think it's silver plate, maybe.
It's either silver plate or some sort of a white metal composite. It's not sterling silver. I do think Tibet is the likely origin. Okay. Certainly when you see this sort of, whether Tibet or India or Pakistan, when you see this sort of encrusting of little metal pieces that are tooled and worked so that you have a design, and then the stones laid in it, that's almost always somewhere in that part of South Asia, to my experience. Okay. So I think you're on the right track there. The stones are very nice. I presume that they're lapis lazuli because of the color. I know there's another blue stone that is of similar value that has a similar look, but that's what it appears. It's fairly lightweight. We start seeing, again, sensibilities changed in the 1970s. I think we can thank the hippie generation for that. A lot of folks went to that part of the world, were exposed to these kind of designs, brought things like this back, and then there was interest in this country in these designs. Then they started importing stuff. So I think your era on this is probably about 50 years ago. And it's just cute. Did you pay a lot or a little?
Well, they had 50 on it, and we got it for half price. So it was like, you know, they had other silver stuff. It was a different one than that bracelet, but
I
yeah.
think you got it just right. I think their original 50 was probably the retail value, and the fact that you got it at half off really is, you're in it just right.
Okay, I like little trinket boxes.
Oh, I do
But then
too.
I saw
And
that-
everybody likes little trinket
Yeah,
boxes. It's a collectible thing now.
But then I got these at Sears, and I couldn't, I just liked the frames and that they were painted tiles. and-
Yes. And I don't know if I just did that or
No,
if you did
they
that.
can't.
Oh, good. Okay,
They're
well,
both
that's
part of
easy.
painting.
So these are, this is interesting because on the front, these are I would say from the green surround, probably 60s vintage. You see a lot of this sort of street scene art in the 50s and 60s. You see people starting to frame tiles again in the 1950s and 60s and hang them as art. And this is all, it's hand painted on the surface, and there's even some texture to it, so you know they actually did do this painting by hand. And it looks French, and it has a signature that sounds French, Benoit. But if you turn it over, it says moss tile made in Japan. And this is an interesting mark to find because people who are collecting old tiles, often they don't have the made in Japan mark. So when you see this S trademark in the middle here in the diamond, that is a Japanese trademark that's worth committing to memory because sometimes you'll just see that. These particular pieces are actually really cute. And the funny thing is you would not know if you looked at them that they were Japanese because the company that put them together is this company in Miami Beach, and their paper just says that this is Miami Beach, USA.
Yeah.
So you would actually have the impression that they were American, but they're not, which was deliberate. They're cute, they're fun, people like them, and I'm sorry, what'd you say you gave for them? Did you?
Oh, it was at Savers, so.
Savers, yeah.
$4 a piece.
$4 a piece,
Yeah.
that's great. I would typically price these at about $20 to $30 each, maybe $50 for the pair if I had them to sell.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's really fun.
Okay, who's up next? How about you, sweetie?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this. We had a piece that sold at auction yesterday, and this is Connie, and Connie mentioned that you had something like it.
Yes, I found that at a Goodwill for $5 here in Michigan. It's not normally something I would pick up, but it caught my eye because of watching certain YouTubers. I thought, there's something, and a quick search was like, oh, this something might be over 100 years old. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you are picking up on things and that you're learning like this because you got yourself a really nice piece for a very good price. And what's nice about this one is that Weller Pottery, Roseville Pottery, Owens Pottery, to a lesser extent Peters and Reed, they all produced similar work like this in Zanesville, Ohio around 1895 to about 1910 during the Art Nouveau period. If you think of craftsman houses, these ochre and avocado colors and the browns were very popular at the time. And so this matched what was current decorating at the time. They also tend to look a lot alike because those companies back then, if they came out with a new line and it seemed like it was going really well, they would literally send the plant managers across the street, and at the end of the shift, when they came out of the other company, they'd say, hey, you want to make an extra $1 a day? We'll hire you. And then they would hire them and steal each other's designs. So they all tend to look alike. They all look really good together, but they can be hard to identify unless you happen to get one that has a really nice mark. And this one has a really good mark that says Weller Luelsa, so we know right away that it's theirs. Weller was the biggest pottery company in the world at the time that this piece was made. So at the time, there were a lot of these out there, but they were all hand-painted. This was when pottery companies were still really focused on artware, thanks to Rookwood in Cincinnati and other companies that made the art of painting pottery more what the focus was rather than just making utilitarian ware. This was a great $5 investment. I'm so glad that you found out about these and you were smart to pick it up. Even if it's not your thing, it can certainly go to someone who loves this, because we saw yesterday, what did the one yesterday here sell for? 100 and...
Probably.
Yeah, something like that. We had so much stuff I can't quite remember. I would price this probably around 100 to 110 if it were mine to have in a shop these days.
Okay.
It's really lovely.
And, well, this piece is more my thing, but I could not find anything about it in any searches. So I'm just curious, like, is it something or is it just a pretty picture?
It's a pretty picture, and I think it is something. And interestingly enough, all the stippling, the optic, the weight of it, even the reeded handle, I believe this is Empoli. We're so used to seeing Empoli as being tall, skinny snifters with a big, huge bowl and a tiny bottom that we don't think that they made anything else. But I'm pretty sure that's who, when I say that's who, Empoli is a town in Italy with several glass-making companies. It's not just one company. But Empoli started out for many, many, many years. They just did bottled green glass, and it was mainly for utility purposes. Then after the war, they needed money and a market, so they started making the things that everyone likes to collect now, like the snifters and the big pieces. That's why you see a lot of them in that bottle green. Well, then they started doing more colors because they found a market and they needed to keep it fresh. And you start seeing some really vibrant colors. And the thing that was interesting about Empoli in the time, in the late 60s and early 70s, this was the cheap stuff that you bought if you didn't want to spend money on American-made West Virginia glass. This was the bargain option. And it's so funny to me now because people are collecting Empoli and paying serious prices for pieces, and they should, because some of them are really great. You said you thrifted this as well?
Yes.
It's so great that you're all thrifters because I don't have to disappoint you with, well, I'm sorry, but...
$3.99.
$3.99. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I would say that you're probably looking at $30 roughly on a piece like this.
Okay.
It's a great color.
Yeah, the color is what caught my attention.
Yes, exactly. And one thing about Empoli is you almost always see this little bit of a riffling on the edge. It's not a flat edge, and that's a clue for their stuff.
Can I do one more?
Oh, yes.
Okay, since I love the blues, there's another one. I actually have a pair of those, but I wasn't sure if they're actual Viking or what it may be.
I'm probably going to need, this is one of these things, if you ever watch Cash Cab and they say, would you like to make a call and ask somebody? I always, there was a big thing when the swung bases started being made. Viking was the one who did it first. L.E. Smith basically copied their designs and slightly changed it, and Viking sued them in trademark court. And the trademark court said, as long as L.E. Smith is making a slightly different design than yours, you cannot trademark that notion of swung base as being yours. And because of that, there's a whole lot of L.E. Smith and a whole lot of Viking that look really similar. And for years, I just called all of it Viking, and now I'm being corrected. Well, no, that one's L.E. Smith. And I'm like, it looks so close to Viking, and you really have to look in the book. So I think this one is L.E. Smith. It's the candle holder. It's got the little base in the bottom, and you have a pair. I think they're really neat. I always like this sort of shield on one side. Morgantown did this too. A lot of companies did this style. Value-wise, it doesn't necessarily matter who made them. These are popular now because the swung base folks are saying, you know, swung bases are really cool. But when you have 10 or 20 of them, they're also really big and you've already filled your window. And then people starting now to look for accessory pieces that have that look and that fun but are not a vase. So we're starting to see more interest in the candle holders, the ewers, some of those other pieces. I would say your pair, I would probably price them over 100 at this point because the market is so crazy for this. And this is a really good capri blue color from the early 60s that you don't see as much.
Okay, yeah, and those were purchased from a small antique store like just a few years ago. I think I paid maybe $25 for the pair.
25 for the pair, right. And at that time, that was probably about right. But we're really starting to see escalation on those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was so fun.
Okay, who's next?
And by the way,
Go
love
ahead,
that polyester top that
I
you see
know.
that she was wearing.
I
It's
love
so
her
cute.
little camper out there too.
Oh yeah, they have this great little 60s camper, a little square one. It's just cute as can be. Hi there.
Hi. Don't laugh. I got a box from an estate sale, and these things were all in the bottom of the box.
Uh-huh.
I had no idea.
bottom of the boxes can be great at estate sales, especially towards the end, because sometimes they just throw, oh, you brought me a black light, thank you. Especially because sometimes they just throw stuff in the box at the end. They're like, you want the box, just take it all. And you got some good things here. So since it was the bottom of the box, I mean, did you pay much for this?
No,
Or was it just sort of, these were kind
They
of...
were a surprise at the bottom of the box.
Oh, so they were sort of free
So
with
it wasn't,
purchase.
yeah, it wasn't what I was.
Like maybe the estate sale company
They threw
forgot
it in
to
there because they
unpack it.
didn't, no, they threw it in there because they did not.
They were done, yeah. Well, let's start, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start with the pen first, real quickly. We're going to like, this is a nice little one that you would hang on a chain and wear and take around. I think it's a mechanical pencil, and it is 1930s or 40s, and this one is 10 karat, gold filled, and gold filled means it's a rolled gold, it's a plating, it's not like, it's not a gold value.
Right.
But it's cute, it's got its little presentation thing. Truthfully, $5, $6, $7 on those. Then you have one that is a pair here, and I've got to decide whether these are real pens or if these are perfume pens, which were also popular at the time. So let's take them out. Okay, this one actually appears to be a pen and pencil set, but sometimes they would have a solid perfume you would just sort of draw behind your ear. They have little jewels on them. They're from the 60s. Again, a very cute little piece. I think that just because they're fun and interesting, you know, the pen collectors like them, and sometimes people just like to put stuff, if they like Hollywood Regency, it's a very elegant thing to drop around, which is why they were sold in the first place back in the 60s. You know, I think you're probably looking at maybe 15 on that would be a retail price. Now we're going to work our way up, because for the bottom of a box, you got some good stuff. This piece here, it's a plated background, so it's not a gold frame, and I'll show you all what I'm looking at here in a minute, but I'll do my looking first. So this is it's a nice carved cameo. It is a hard shell, I mean, it is a shell cameo, and it's done on a flat brass back, but the little shell cameo here, you know, it's on the small side. But there are people interested in cameos. I have older dealers who used to sell them for hundreds of dollars each tell me, oh, you can't sell a cameo anymore, and I sell every one I get because I'm not charging hundreds of dollars each. This one, truthfully, probably $35 to $50. We know it's older because it's got a safe, it does not have a safety catch, so this is probably from about 1910.
For the bottom of the box.
From the bottom of the box, that's pretty good.
Yeah, blind squirrel.
I actually just sold all my cameos here yesterday, and I'm now going to be looking for more. But the last piece we have here, and this one was sort of my favorite, so I held it for last. Richard Hudnut is a good name in compacts if you find it. And this is a Richard Hudnut set from about probably the late 50s because it's an emerald green, which was a popular color back then. And when you pull it out, what's really great about these is this is a little purse set, so you would just carry this in your purse. And then when you went to do your makeup, you fold it open. It probably had a really cheap plastic comb that's long gone here. But then you pull this out, it needs one rhinestone, which will cost you a few dollars, and maybe a rhinestone on the lipstick, but you've got the compact and the lipstick and their rhinestones studded, and that's what the collectors like. So this set, if I had it, I would fix that rhinestone for $5, and I would probably put $50 on this.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
Oh.
No, they really like these. Put 50 on and take 40 or 45, and you
If
will.
I was a reseller.
If you were a reseller. For you as a collector, just enjoy it. And if you want to stick it's not what you collect, well then trade it for what you do collect.
I will.
There you go. You've got some trade bait there.
So much.
Thank you. That was really fun.
And you can, if you,
I'll bring this back.
I know, you know where I live.
Yes, and vice versa.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Who wants to come next? All right.
Oh, isn't this pretty?
We've got a couple items for you.
Very nice.
Oh.
Now, how did you get this piece?
We're helping a friend sell some stuff that she inherited from an aunt.
Oh, very nice.
Most of the stuff has been stored away for 30 years, and most of, from what we can tell, is over 100 years old.
Interesting. Yeah, this is a very substantial, heavy piece of glass with a nice fern and rose etch. And yes, absolutely, I would say this does date back at least 100 years. In fact, I'm thinking closer to maybe 1900. And this particular piece, we had a piece come up earlier of crystal that we were talking about, beveled edges. And so the first thing I look at is, are the edges beveled? Because this is European. This edge is beveled. The interior edge, I'm going to look with my loupe, but I don't believe is. So that's going to rule out Mosier. But what it does do is it gives us an indication that this is probably Bohemian glass. And
she collected a lot of the
she collected a lot of that area. Yeah. I would say this is Bohemian. It's a shame you're not sitting on my side because we've got good light coming in from that, and you can see how wonderful the etch is. It's really detailed. There's a grape arbor around here, roses and ferns, and everything on the top as well. These little squiggles here definitely tell us Bohemian, because that was just, for some reason, they like to do that decoration on edges. So it's going to date back at least 100 years, and I would say the value on that is probably around $100 these days, potentially, retail value. Now, you're helping them sell, and of course, as a private seller, it depends how you sell. If they're going to do an estate sale, you might price these things at half of retail to start and see how it goes from there. Okay, this little piece is very cute, and this one is marked Dresden, Germany. And it is Dresden. This is Dresden transferware, but it does have some hand-painted embellishments on it as well. It does have the Dresden, Germany mark. This piece is 20th century, but it's pretty early 20th century, probably in the 1920s or 30s. And it's got this interesting design. It's got the quarters. They made pieces like this after the war too, but they would have been marked West Germany, or I mean East Germany actually is where Dresden was. So we would expect a different mark on that. The Dresden makers pretty much took pieces, originally they took Meissen pieces that were factory seconds and painted them. That's where Dresden came from. By the 20th century, they do all sorts of decoration, and you can see that this part is done, the raised part is actually hand painted with an enamel paint, so it's got that texture, and then this is a transfer decal. It's a cute piece. The 20th century Dresden doesn't sell for the big numbers of the old, but I still think it'd be a $25 or $30 base. And this one, this was the company that first gave Meissen a run for its money. Well, I say company, the area of production that first gave Meissen a run for its company. This is Capodimonte porcelain from Italy. And it doesn't have, it has a mark on the bottom. This is the Napoleon mark. Now, originally, King Charles, who was originally from France and then took over Spain, started the factory in the 1700s, and they did hard paste porcelain that was different than the softer stuff that Meissen did. So it actually fired better and had more quality. And so in its time, it was actually considered even better than Meissen. Well, Meissen quickly, of course, caught up to that, but then also King Charles became the King of Spain and closed the factory. So it was gone for a long time, and then in the 1830s, new factories started to spring up, including this one, Napoleon. And if you look at this mark with the crown, this is actually an older mark, probably 1830 to 1930. And then you see newer pieces of Napoleon, and it starts to get sloppier and sloppier. The stuff we see in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is actually rather low quality compared to this. But you look at this and you start to see the detail, especially in the face and the figures. And so this is a nice little piece. I would expect a retail price probably in a $125 range on a piece like that. This one here, this is actually really fantastic to me. People are definitely fond of cats. My mother collected cats, and she always liked cats that were in different poses. Well, these are definitely a different pose. These cats are mad, and they are hissing, and they are not cute little kitties. I mean, this one has, and the mouth's open, and you can see the teeth, and look at all the detail in this. I mean, it's just, and the kitten is hissing and howling too, and they're standing next to an urn. There's this heraldic symbol on the bottom, and then on the bottom of the piece we see a little blue mark that is a porcelain tag that's applied, and it says VB, but that is not Villery and Bach. That's actually a company that is obscure to me. This is porcelain bisque from about 1890 or 1900, so I'm not sure who VB is, to be honest. I'm sure it could be looked up. It's all hand painted, and this is a match safe. So you would put your matches in here, and then when you got one out, there always would be some sort of a rough surface. In this case, rather than making a rough surface, they just made the edges rough, so you could take the match and flip it off of there. So this would have sat near a fireplace or a stove or someplace where people needed maybe actually, when they're this figural and they're kind of sweet like this, usually maybe not the fireplace or the stove, more likely in a bedroom where you lit a candle to walk around at night. So it's a really cute piece. It's hand painted. Well, cute is in the eye of the beholder. That is not a cute kitty. But it's a very collectible kitty. I would think that you might see, again, $75 to $100 retail on that piece. And then this one, now this one has a few condition problems, and condition really does matter. The lid here has been broken and re-glued, but at least it's all intact. And it's an inkwell. Here's our two little ink pots that come out. It's made of porcelain. It's hand painted with a windmill, so this is going to be Delft blue out of Holland. Not that everything with a windmill makes it Delft blue, but in this case it definitely is. And it's got the cherubs with the wings, which is very cute. This piece is a little puzzling because it doesn't have a whole lot of wear on the bottom, and of course these were made earlier in time and later in time, so we start to look at the delicacy of the painting, and my guess is that this is probably actually right after the Second World War or shortly before. I don't think it's a Victorian piece because it's not quite as subtle. The colors are a little harsher. Yeah, so my feeling in the condition is in it probably around $40 to $45. If it was perfect, it might be double that. But with porcelain stuff, they're kind of picky that way. Now the question is, you've got this information, what do you do with it? And I would say that some of these pieces, if they're a little more special, if you're willing or the person you're helping has time, then you might consider listing some of these online closer to the full retail price and give them a chance to sell for that or have offers made. And if it's, well, we're getting ready to have a sale and the sale's next week, start everything at about half of what you think antique retail is, and then you can negotiate from there after you've had a day or two of selling. Don't do any discounts on the first day, by the way. It drives me crazy when I conduct estate sales and people, it's like, I've been open 10 minutes, they're like, will you take half? And I'm like, there's 300 people in this house. Why would I be negotiating if we just opened? So, stay firm the first day. You can wheel and deal as the sale goes on.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Yes, Kitty does not like fire, Laura. I'm looking at the comments, and yes, that cat is ticked off. Happy old soul. I don't know who you are, but welcome to the chat, and it's nice to have. Thank you all who are sitting and watching too for being so patient. Who do we have next? Oh, good. I'm so glad.
We got Silly, and then we'll put Timmy in.
Okay.
Silly Jimmy.
I almost forgot.
Oh, I'm so glad you came. Thank you for bringing this.
You're welcome.
Tell me how you got this and what you know about it.
Garage sale, cheap. And I like it. I like the Curtis share, and yeah, anything that's floating on a rock and signed is great.
I think so too, and it's interesting to me because I grew up with, it was like something you saw in the 70s growing up. These sorts of things started to appear and they were various quality. And now this one is not a Curtis Juret, but it is signed, and it's signed DeMott. And this is a signature we see a lot. I have not been able to find specific information about who DeMott was, but this particular piece, well, I have a little story of my own about this piece, but first tell me if you didn't get it for much, I know you're a reseller, what were you thinking of asking for it?
Like $10 to $15.
$10 to $15, okay. Well, There is one little point here that needs a solder point, but otherwise it's in good condition. Now, my story is that I was at a flea market in Louisville, Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, and those folks out in the YouTube world maybe have seen the video or the short. There was a guy there who was selling a bunch of stuff, and one of these exactly like this was there, and I put it in the pile. He said, make a pile, and the bigger the bundle, the cheaper it is. So I put the pile in, and he looks at it, and he says, I want $300 because that airplane is from World War II and that alone is worth $300. And I said, well, it's really not from World War II. These were done in the 1970s, but it is a cute piece. But how about if I take that out? And he said, I still want $300 for everything. And I said, well, you can put it all back then. And it escalated from there. We did not get along. It is a neat piece. There is no way they were not making anything like this until the 1970s. I think the retail value on this probably around $50. So your $10 is actually a really good deal, and I almost feel like buying it from you just to spite it.
Go for it, George.
The gift that keeps on giving. Yes.
Well, thank you for bringing it in.
Yes.
Okay, Timmy. You need to grab that, George.
Well, it might go home with me. I liked it when I saw it the first time at $300.
Were you a hissy cat with him?
I was, yes. Well, the worst thing was I got up and said, oh, no, thanks. And I turned around and I knocked down a little tiny jade green child's cup that's worth about $4 or $5 that was in the pile. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I need to pay you for that. And he said, I want $20. And I said, and I was about to put all the stuff back for him, and I said, for $20, you get to put everything back. And I threw the $20 and stomped off. I was so mad. And the next thing, Zeno comes in because he was with me, and he had left the building, and he came back in, and he's standing next to the pile, and he's like, hey, come back. Aren't you going to negotiate with this guy? And I was like, get over here. No, we're not negotiating. How did you get this?
This was my, actually, great aunt's, and then she gave it to my aunt for a wedding gift.
Oh.
So, but it was my great aunt's mother's.
How sweet. And there is, oh my gosh, it's so great to see one of these the way it's supposed to be. Pickle casters like this were really popular in the 1870s, 80s, 90s. One place you will see a fantastic collection, if any of you ever get out to Virginia City, Nevada, which was a big thing during the silver rush there in the 1860s and 70s. Mark Twain ended up out there and wrote about it, and he would hang out at a place called the Bucket of Blood Saloon, which is still there. It's a fantastic place. It's just like it was back then, a little old wooden saloon with the bar stools and the whole thing, and they have up on the top shelf 100 of these in a collection all the way around, and it's just really something to see. The thing with pickle casters is they became very popular to collect about, in the 60s and 70s, and people took all the good examples, and then, well, what was left? Well, we have one, but it's broken. Well, we have one, but it doesn't really fit in this holder because it's not the original glass. Oh, it's missing the tongs. What's so terrific is you've got everything. It's all in really good shape, and it all goes together because this fits and this, by the way, folks, if you see these, it barely moves around. This is how they're supposed to fit. If you pick one up and it's all loose in there, it's not the original liner. This is a nice, I'm really bad. You Fenton folks can help me with this. For some reason, I have a hard time remembering coin spot versus coin dot. One of them is where it's raised on the outside and one's on the inside, and this one's on the inside. So it's coin spot, I think. Thank you. I think that's right. I think the dot is where it's raised. It's got nice enameling. Interestingly enough, it has an inclusion in it.
That's what I noticed.
Yep, this is a little factory floss. Something got in the glass and stayed with it. But it's just a beautiful piece of cranberry. They had to use 22 karat gold to get this color back then, so it was considered expensive and fancy then. And this definitely would have been. The bail is silver plate.
It does have some mark.
It has a mark on the bottom. Yeah, they often do. This one is marked. Manufactured and guaranteed by the Middletown Plate Company, and that makes sense because that was Connecticut. Almost all the silver and silver plate was done in Connecticut back then. And so we'll put this back on. It's just great that everything about it is authentic, and because of that, this piece, back at the peak when people were really serious about collecting this piece might have been as much as $450. Nowadays, you're probably looking at maybe $3.25, and the reason the price has gone down isn't because they're not beautiful and interesting. It's because so many went into collections that new collectors couldn't start finding them anymore, and so they moved on to other things.
Oh, okay.
It's a great piece.
Yeah, it was given to my aunt.
It's so nice that it's been in
gift, and she
family.
gave it, gave it to me because my first one is Ruby. So.
Oh, Ruby is your name, so the color is just right up your alley. Aw, that's so cool. Thank you.
And then one more piece.
Sure.
It's kind of big.
Okay.
But this was in my house when I bought it.
Oh, it came with the house.
Yep. And
oh, nice.
my
Yes.
house is a 1885 kind of Victorian.
Aw.
And I'm only the third owner of the home.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, it's in
Third
Marshall.
owner. Wow, third
Yeah.
owner in 140 years. Well, everyone
Yeah.
must have loved the house then.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you must too.
Oh, I love it, yeah.
That's great. Well, this is a really neat tapestry, and you notice it's multicolored, which is good because a lot of times these were hung where the light would get to them, and they just are a uniform brownish tan. And this is how they were supposed to look. They always had some color in the field. So if you see one of these out there shopping and it's all bleached out, unless you just love it for yourself, pass it up because it's just, it's essentially damaged. This one was framed, and if you look, the frame is a 1920s or 30s frame. These tapestries were typically made in Belgium and France at this time, and they were basically small versions based on the giant tapestries that they made in the Renaissance in Italy. And they became very popular to collect in the United States because William Randolph Hearst bought a whole bunch of the giant Italian ones from the Renaissance and hung them in San Simeon. And when they would do the newsreels and show his big dining room and people would see these things, then people got interested. And so at the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago, the Belgian pavilion and the French pavilion both sold these in great numbers, and there was a real interest in them. So 1920s and 30s is the era. So probably the second owner of your house put it in.
Okay.
And it's a nice size, it's in good shape, the color is good, and because of all of that, I would value it a little over $100 today, which is a nice little rebate for buying your house.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Interesting to get that information.
Got some more?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, wow, this has been so fun, and what a nice bunch of people and a nice bunch of merchandise, and we got to share it with the folks online. Is there anything else that you wanted me to look at that you...
John had a pile of, I guess, should we leave it? I don't know what he's got here.
Oh, well, let's take a look really
I think
fast,
it's just-
because this is fun. We've got time for a little bit more.
I think he's cleaning a junk drawer out. Leave it or sell it. I really don't know. Because I don't know what, I don't know. What do you think? Leave it or sell it or ditch it?
Okay, well, these are kind of fun little things, and let's take a look, because this is the sort of fun little thing you get in box lots at auction and stuff. So first of all, they have the Duncan yo-yo. I'm terrible with yo-yos, so you're going to see me do it that much, because I never could make these things work. I have a whole box of these for sale, too.
Rice Krispies.
And that's the thing on the back. This is the Glow Imperial. This actually has a little bit of phosphorescence, so it actually glows. And then Rice Krispies. So it is an advertising for Kellogg's, and of course Battle Creek's right down the road, so this is where the most collectors for this would be. And you know, this one's probably $15 or $20.
We'll keep it.
So that's not bad. This little guy is just the sort of the classic little friction toy mouse. This is the sort of thing made in Japan in the 50s that got thrown in your Christmas stocking as something to keep you occupied while your brothers and sisters opened their presents. They were just little 5 and dime store things, but this one works. It's got its friction. It's got a cute face. And you know, we get 10 or 12 or $15 for these sometimes now.
We'll keep that one too.
This little thing just says Berlin, and it's an ashtray, but the thing about Berlin, of course, because of the airlift, it became, Berlin sort of became this very important focus of the Cold War, keeping Berlin free, keeping the stuff going in, the airlift, all of that. Became a really big deal to the West, and so people would travel to Berlin and bring back souvenirs. This is from probably about 1960. It's just sort of interesting the way that what it was a little serving tray, and then they're like, oh, if we put this metal clip in, we can sell it as an ashtray too. So that's a 50s, 60s thing. You know, it might be $5 or $8.
Okay.
But the thing I waited on are these. Do you know how to play these?
No! I kind of remember the sound, but
yes, these are clackers.
I gotta make sure that's hooked on. Yeah, yes it is.
They're called clackers. They're also known out west. When I was a kid, my sister referred to these as bolo balls. She was really good at playing them, and the whole point was that you would start to swing them around in a circle, and they would clack back and forth while you did it. And a whole lot of kids. A whole lot of kids lost control of them, bashed some other kid in the face, you're going to put an eye out. And these actually, unfortunately, also a number of people actually got their wrists broken playing with these because it would tangle around and they go wham. And because of that, they got taken off the market as dangerous, and that's why they're collectible now. The last pair I sold of these, I got $35 for.
Are you kidding me? That figures something John would play with.
Exactly.
And I don't know why he brought that up.
Oh, well, this is just sort of cute. This is a very, it's not worth a whole lot, but it is interesting for one reason, and it's this patent device. And it's basically for a traveling suitcase like a steamer trunk. And it's just this device can move back and forth so you can adjust it and adjust the size and all that. You know, little hangers are not worth a whole ton, but I am finding that the wooden hangers from old hotels and various establishments, they are starting to sell. I have a friend who brings them to the show. She charges $5 a piece. She sells probably half a dozen or a dozen at every show, and it's usually, oh, that's the town I grew up in. This is in Florida, so she's in Michigan. She comes to Florida for the wintertime. She shops in Ohio because she's near Toledo, and all the Michiganders in Ohio, oh, I grew up there, oh, I want this. And the funny thing is, it's dawned on me, I've downsized like a lot of people, and when you downsize, you give up some of your collections. And so I'm always thinking, well, what can I collect that doesn't take a lot of space? And it dawned on me lately that I have to have clothes hangers. So I am now collecting old wooden hangers from different places because it's a collection I can use every day and it doesn't cost much.
Well, there's a lesson here. I mean, this little pile that I thought was basically junk
is possibly $40 or $50 if you want to take the time to chase it. And that's the thing. So, you know, little piles of junk, box lots, you might not want to keep every single thing, but, you know, it pays to go. I mean, look at the stuff she brought in earlier where there's a cameo and there's this nice compact set and it was in the bottom of a box. So box lots can be fun. It's just if you start buying them, you better have an idea what you're going to do with all the stuff you don't want because you're going to end up with a bunch, and otherwise you better have a place this size.
Yeah, like it's like Rosie's. Anyway, this has been fun, and I am so appreciative of you being here. I'm so appreciative of our Rosie Family at Home and George's channel, and please subscribe to one or the other, whichever one you haven't subscribed to. And we've had a great time at Teak Stock. We're going to do some more videos this afternoon, and just enjoy this beautiful fall day.
Yes, and tomorrow on my channel, my premiere, I will be there, and it will be showing the event through yesterday of those folks who are watching out while you're seeing today. And like she said, we'll have more videos, so we'll see you there. And thank you everybody in the audience for sitting through all of this. And it just was really fun to bring it to you, and we'll see you again soon.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I have to hit this button here.
All done.
Can I still go on, or do you guys all done?
Okay.